Awesome. All right. Hello and welcome from Sydney, Australia. It's 7:30 a.m., so it's an early start, but I do have my coffee, if I bring it close to the camera with me, so I'm ready to go and talk all things AI. Okay. A lot of you already use MathSpace, but I like to start kind of my meetings just reminding myself and everyone why we exist. We believe that every student can excel at math with the right help at the right time. And we at MathSpace exist because we want to be the right help at the right time for every student. And that's why we get people from all over the world trying to serve that mission. Okay. There is a lot that I can talk about with AI. Rhonda would attest that I could probably blabber on for hours about each of these topics, but we only have limited time today. So I wanted to focus most of my attention on what you are most interested in. So let me find my poll and ask you, of these 5 topics, what are you most interested in learning about today? And I will definitely touch on all of these, but I'll just spend a little bit more time on the areas that you are most interested in. And you can select more than one. So you can select them all if you're interested in everything. And we might have to do another webinar to go into it in detail. All right, answers starting to come through. I'll give it 10 more seconds and then I'll share the results with everyone.
Looks like we've got some love for Milo so far in these polls. So
yeah, so hopefully you can all see that now. I think I'm sharing it. A demo of Milo's AI capabilities, which is the last bit. So I will make sure I go through some of the other parts fast. And then the practical stuff, right? How I can use Milo, how I can use LLMs as a teacher. Awesome. Okay. And a little bit of interest in how LLMs work and the latest developments in LLMs. Okay, great. All right, that's good. That means I'll fly through the first sections and hopefully we can spend a whole bunch of time looking at Milo at the end. All right. Okay, but it is helpful to have a little bit of background knowledge, especially as math educators, because this is absolutely the future with AI. And so you want to, math educators, we want to know how things work. We want to share with students how things work. And this is something that's going to shape maybe the next decade or century of what it is to be a human. I think we'll look back at 2023 as the year the large language models changed everything. And basically, like the quick version of how they work, imagine you have a dictionary of every word and say there's 600,000 words. There are more. And we just start from like word 1 right up to the last word in the dictionary. What LLMs are doing is they're turning each of these into a number, each word into a number, right? And then they are, so hey, how are you could be those numbers. And then they're just guessing what best number works best. Okay, so if you have R, and then what are the chances that the next word is you or they or things or fine? And you might say, okay, there's a 5% chance of all of these, and then there might be a really small chance of something like R animals. Okay, sum them all up and you add to 100%. So this is called a 2-gram model. This is a 3-gram model where there's 3 words. So as you get more words, you can imagine it starts to get a bit, the probabilities start to shift. And so how are, then you might be a lot higher of percentage after that, or how are they? But things like how are fine, unlikely, how are animals, unlikely. So it just starts to get better with the more words that you give it, the more what you call context in machine learning lingo. And so if you increase it again, you can see the probabilities change again. And this is really all that LLMs are doing. They are guessing what's the best next word based on all the data that I've read on the internet. So what really changed to make this, I mean, these have been around for a long time. So how did all of a sudden it become so smart? A few things. One is the transformer architecture. So a paper written in 2017 by somebody at Google, an architecture that let us do this at a much bigger scale. Then, you can imagine like it'll be a massive spreadsheet. We're talking about 1 million words by 1 million words and what word comes next. So the architecture improvement that led us to do that. And what this attention architecture allowed is for basically using that context a lot better. So if you read this sentence, my dog's name is Ben. He's a big dog with large paws. Ben likes to play and then fetch with me. So looking at this Ben and fetch, if I just had Ben likes to play, what's the next word? And you had none of the original context, then you would not select, you'd unlikely select fetch. You might play soccer or football or whatever it is, like a more common thing. But given that context, that Ben is a big dog, and that connection, and this is what the architecture allows to do, it basically it gives it attention to focus on the right areas. So given this Ben now likes to play, what should I look for? The architecture allows us to say, where does Ben exist in the past? What do we know about Ben in the past? And we know that Ben is a dog. And so fetch becomes a really much more likely word for the LLM to select. So that's what LLMs are doing. They're just autocomplete. What's the next word? But they're incredibly, incredibly good. So how do you steer it when it's just autocomplete of the next word? In the very early days of like ChatGPT 3, you would actually use like a QA format and it'll say, what's the next word? And given everything that you've read on the internet, well, when you have a QA format, you know that it should give the answer. And so it might give you the answer after something like that as the next words that fit in that sentence. And then we developed, and specifically OpenAI and the ChatGPT product, developed these two methods, fine-tuning and reinforcement learning. So supervised fine-tuning was a way to sample a bunch of data from a data set. So a labeler will come in, a human labeler will demonstrate the desired output. So it will say, okay, here's a data set of like great responses to these questions. So it might say, write an essay about this topic, and this is a great sample essay for you. And so by doing this, it trained the model on like what the types of responses that humans would consider to be really good. And then the next piece was this reinforcement learning with human feedback, where in this approach, it would give a question to the LLM. So you give it the prompt. The LLM would spit out a bunch of different answers, A, B, C, D, and a human would rank which of those they like best. And this trains the model on what kinds of outputs that humans rates the most highly. Interestingly, this is also the way that we do a lot of the safety. So if you were to ask ChatGPT, how do I make a bomb? ChatGPT will respond with something like, as a large language model, I'm not allowed to respond to that question. Of course, somewhere on the dark internet, there is instructions on how to make a bomb. And so ChatGPT would know how to do that from everything that he has read. But we've trained it through this human reinforcement learning with the human feedback to say, that's a bad response. What's a great response? A great response is, as a large language model, or for safety reasons, I'm not allowed to discuss this. And because we've trained it to do that, it starts to spit out those answers. So this is how we steer the models to kind of give us answers that we like as humans, whether it be for safety or whether it be for kind of style, for creativity, all those kinds of things, or whether it even be for accuracy, which is kind of something we care about as mathematicians. So why did no one see this coming? Why did suddenly 2023 all of a sudden this became great? Probably the biggest thing is the scale and the speed, the leaps in capabilities in computing power. So there are supercomputers, GPUs that are out there, like farms and warehouses of these supercomputers that are training these models. So just that speed, and then the scale of the data as well, how much data it can consume from its, they read everything on the internet, and then a whole bunch of private data sources too. And then there's the creativity aspect, which we talked a bit about how, and the steering that really made this so much better and so much smarter. Okay, so why should I care? It's just an autocomplete, right? Like it's nothing special. Well, why you should care is this is the moment that I had the aha moment where I saw, ChatGPT 3.5 was released in late 23, and then only like 3 or 4 months later, ChatGPT 4 was released. So these blue bars that you see here, that's ChatGPT 3.5 scores on, say, let's look at this one, the SAT math. Okay, so it scored maybe 65%. Only a few months later, it was scoring 90% with GPT-4. And you can see, even higher, crazier increases in the bar exam, for example, the legal exam, 10%, GPT 3.5 suddenly went to 90% with GPT 4. Now, okay, there's a leap in capability. What is it that changed to allow this to happen? No algorithmic improvements, just the scale of the data and the scale of the training. So even till now, there is no end in sight at the moment. The more data you throw at it and the more GPUs, the more computing power you give it to it, it gets smarter. But it doesn't only get smarter in terms of predicting the next word. These emergent behaviors start to come, what they call emergent behaviors, which is it actually seems to reason, which is quite scary that it wasn't trained on reasoning. It was just trained to complete the next question. And it was just trained on knowing the context of the attention. But for some reason, unknown, it starts to actually develop this ability to reason. So that's why GPT 4.0 now is really quite great. And we'll talk a little bit about the latest models in a bit. Okay, so if that wasn't kind of scary enough, we can use similar techniques for images, for audio, for writing code, because an image is just, instead of saying what word fits next, it's like what RGB value, what color fits best in the next pixel. For audio, it's what frequency, wavelength, and amplitude fits best in the next millisecond. For writing code, it's just autocomplete, but it's on the next code word. And so we can use the same kind of approaches to make images. So I asked, give me a picture to celebrate math teachers at a conference, learning from each other. And we got this pretty impressive image. Then I say, hey, make it in the style of Rembrandt. And it gives that. And all it's doing is just saying, what's the next pixel? What's the best next pixel? Based on the context that I have, what's the best next pixel to make the model happy? And you get this kind of what looks like a masterpiece, unless you look really closely and you see people are missing fingers and things like that. But yeah, it's getting to the level where it's quite amazing what it can generate. Here's one. I might mute myself and hopefully you can hear the sound coming through. I'll just check with you.
No sound. Try again.
Okay, I'm going to see if you can just hear it through just my regular microphone then. Okay, this is me giving a presentation in Spanish, my third language.
Desafío de maestros de matemáticas diferente a otras competencias. Normalmente, en competencias de matemáticas, premias el logro estudiantil y destacas a los mejores. El desafío.
All right. How was my Spanish there? Just for the record, I don't know how to speak a single word of Spanish. So this is one of our developers sent me this. So it's a video that I did years ago in English language. You can see I look a bit younger there. And he found it on YouTube and put it through an AI system and said, okay, make Mo speak in Spanish. And so it's just to give you an idea, like it's combined here the audio, the images with the lip syncing, and then of course the translation of the words all into one model, and there you go. So I'm sure you've probably heard about all the kind of deep fakes and things. It is quite scary that you could get anybody to say anything with these tools, but that's, and all it is behind the scenes is this autocomplete of what's the next word, what's the next frequency with the sounds, and what's the best image, what's the best pixel in the best color for the next pixel. Okay, so that's that. What's the latest? Really quickly, on the latest, there's a whole bunch of players. A lot of us know ChatGPT, but Meta has Llama as an open source model. Anthropic has Claude, which is really good and competes with ChatGPT almost on par. X has Grok. Google has Gemini. And there's a French company called Mistral that's doing really interesting things as well. But I'll focus mostly on OpenAI with the ones that we use inside MathSpace, and that seems to be the one that's leading the path. And then each of these has different models. So when we say OpenAI, they've got their ChatGPT 4.0, they've got their Turbo, they've got a new O1 model, which I'll talk about a bit about, and similar with all the other companies. And they all just have kind of different price points, quality, speed. So there's a whole bunch of variations of these going through in the market right now. Okay, and there's a bunch of leaderboards that go out there and track what they're good at. So how good are they at math? So GPT-4o and Claude are actually really close. And when you look at the confidence levels, like any of these top 4 or 5 are all, you know, could be better or worse on a variety of different things just with the confidence levels that we have there. Okay, so the latest from OpenAI, they released a model called O1, and it is really amazing in its capabilities. I'll go through this quickly because we do want to get into the Milo demonstrations. But what O1 effectively does is it uses a prompting technique. So a quick primer on what prompting techniques are, because I think it's very relevant for you who want to use LLMs. And just to give you, when I wanted to talk about O1, just give you a look into my process. I wanted to talk a bit about O1. I said, but I can't really talk about O1 until we know about prompting techniques. So how can I give them a quick primer on prompting techniques? It's like, well, just ask ChatGPT. Okay, so here it is, ChatGPT. This is how I use ChatGPT. Just anytime I have a question, it's my thought partner. It's my go-to, my first thing that I go to. And that's how I would recommend that you start to just get exposed to it. So zero-shot prompting is just where you just ask a question and gives you the answer. Putting in the question is called a prompt, and zero-shot just means, here's a question, give me an answer. Or one-shot prompting, you give it one example. So you say, I want you to write me a solution to this math problem. For example, here's a math problem and here's the solution. And it kind of tries to emulate your style. So a few-shot prompting, you give it a couple of examples. Then where things got really interesting is chain of thought prompting. This is encouraging the AI to break down its reasoning or thought process in steps. And this gives it logical consistency and problem-solving accuracy. And the reason why it does this, it's kind of an unexpected thing. If you ask the AI to take a deep breath and think about things step by step, it would give you better answers. Like, wait a minute, does it even breathe? Asking it to take a deep breath gives you better answers. What it does is it slows down the AI that because it's just an autocomplete, the more words it kind of prints, the more context it kind of gives itself, and the more attention it gives to the right areas, and it gives that logical consistency. So this is a really interesting prompting technique. And so what O1 did, and another interesting thing is just sampling. So what about if you could ask the AI multiple times or ask it to give you multiple answers, and then ask another AI to go and check and select the best of those answers. So that's another technique. So they've incorporated these techniques into O1 model, and they give it more time to think about answers, and it's gotten a lot better as a result. And they do this not just at the end times, like just by prompting, but actually in the training data itself. So in the training, they're giving it more time to think. And the results are phenomenal, and particularly at math. So we looked before at the SAT math. This math score is for Olympiad level math. So it's like the highest difficulty questions that you can get in math. GPT-4o, the GPT that we've been using for a while now, only scores 13%. The O1 models score 56%, the preview, and then the full O1 version scores 83%. So these are like the most challenging math problems that our best and brightest, struggle with. And O1 is getting to the point where it can do 83%. O1 preview is the one that we have access to right now if you're a ChatGPT Plus subscriber. And then the O1 model, the full O1 model, hasn't even been released. Coding, another one, going from 11% to 62 to 89%. And then these are PhD level science questions, where we're talking about 78% that these models are scoring. So really, really, really strong performance with this O1, especially at math. Okay, let's get into the part that a lot of you were interested in. So what does it mean for me? What are some applications as a mathematics teacher? Some really good ones, generating practice problems, particularly with real world context. So I'll give you an example of one that I did. I'll just zoom in on my screen. Okay. So this is the prompt that I use. I'm looking to write a context around a math problem where students are required to graph a logarithmic equation, but for a restricted domain. Okay, so this is a curriculum standard that we need to address. And it's easy enough to have just questions like these, but creating real life, real world context for this is a challenge. So it's something that, you know, when we're writing our problems that we can do but it might take us quite a while to think about a good application of this. For O1, so I'm using the O1 preview model, it thought for 24 seconds and it came up with this really nice context. An acoustic engineer, sound intensity is given by this function, and then machine B has this sound intensity, and then they want to analyze the difference in the decibels. And here are our parts A, B, and C. Express the X as a single logarithmic function, determine the domain, and graph over its domain. Okay, so we're testing the concept that's the standard that we were looking for, but we've created a nice real world application that would probably take us all, well, it would take me maybe 15 to 20 minutes to just think about things. Maybe I'd Google some applications of logarithms. And for ChatGPT, it thought about it for a full 24 seconds. And it gives you an insight into its thinking. So how does it get this good? It's because of that chain of thought. So before it actually just spits out a response, like ChatGPT just straight away spits out the first response, it first clarifies the function. I'm exploring a logarithmic function with a restricted domain. Then it determines the domain, takes a closer look, brainstorming viewpoints. So this is where it kind of gets different results and thinks about which ones and discards the ones that aren't so great and says, let me go down and dig further into this part, piecing together the options, evaluating the logarithms, context exploration, expressing, analyzing, breaking down the problem, identifying the scenario, like all of this done in 24 seconds and giving you this. This is a really awesome application for math teachers. When am I going to use this? What's a real life application, etc. Just coming up with good problems to think about, something different to what might already be in the textbook, because you want to give some students some extra problems. All these things are really, O1 is very, very capable of doing these things. Okay, if anyone does have questions, jump into the Q&A and ask questions, and I'll take them at the end as you go through. Yeah, if you want to share any interesting things that are coming out of this that you want to share with other teachers, feel free to jump in the chat and discuss that. I won't be monitoring it, but Rhonda will. And yeah, so that's a great example. Grading handwritten worksheets. So I want to take you through a process that I went through here. So one limitation of O1 is it doesn't yet take in images. So I'm sure it'll come soon, but at this stage, O1 doesn't have images. So I tried this out with ChatGPT 4.0, the older model, which does accept images and files and things like that. O1 doesn't accept any of that. So I just Googled looking for an example of a worksheet. And I found this one. I was like, okay, and it looks like it's been graded as it went through. And so I asked ChatGPT, my student self-marked this worksheet. Can you confirm he was accurate? If not, identify anywhere he's wrong for me to double check. So look through the images and it says, first it had a technical difficulty doing the images. So I had to upload it again, but then here's an analysis. This question was marked wrong, marked wrong, marked wrong, marked wrong, marked wrong. So the 5 questions marked wrong. And then it says, yep, they correctly identified the errors. And then I said, well, all the others correct. So, and then it went through and it said, yeah, they were all correct except this one. So student's answer was 1418, but the correct answer was 1413. So, oh, okay. So I went back to look at that one. And which one was it? It was this one here. So it said they said it was correct. So it said the student's answer was 1418, but the correct answer was 1413. So on closer inspection, I think the student actually did write that. Maybe they rubbed out their old answer and put it in there. And so it's the same kind of mistake that a human might make. It was just like I misread the response there. But it just gives you an idea of like, this is the same level of human capabilities now where, you know, it made an error, but it's kind of a similar error because of the messy handwriting that's in there. So phenomenal that it can pick up and mark these handwritten worksheets as you go through, obviously pending students' legibility, which is probably a similar problem to what teachers have anyway, humans have anyway. So that's an example of something that you could do. Other things are just that we use it a lot as just thought partners. So we want to develop lesson plans for diverse learners, for English language learner support, and you can just jump in there and just use it as a thought partner. I'm teaching a lesson on fractions. I have an English language learner. What are some extra supports I can provide? And so these are some things that we do. What we found is, it's definitely not, it's in all of these things, it's never perfect. It's not going to give you the great answers that it's not going to give you perfect answers. You always will review it as a human, but it's really great at generating some ideas. And then with the back and forth conversation, it does become perfect. So the output's only as good as the input, but it just speeds up how quickly you can create these when you have somebody to bounce ideas off. And that's how I think of ChatGPT. I think of it as a thought partner. Any task that I'm looking to do, I just jump on ChatGPT first and say, okay, give me some ideas. Let's get me started. And then I have a conversation back and forth, and it does the grunt work of, writing it all out for you. So it just speeds you up in everything that you're doing. But of course, it's never perfect, and you must always, never always take it with a grain of salt, whatever it comes out of there. Yeah, and similar for engaging group activities. So yeah, I've got another poll. I'm just interested to know how often people are using ChatGPT or others. It's not just ChatGPT. So how often are you using AI in your classrooms? Is it something that's daily, a few times a week, a few times a month, rarely, or never? All right, results starting to come in. All right, I'll give it 10 seconds and share the results. Okay, so yeah, it's mixed, but you have some that are like rarely and never. And then you have quite a few that are daily and a few times a week. So yeah, I would really think that if you're not using it a few times a week, you're not using it enough. And I'm getting to the point, I've gotten to the point where I'm using it daily, and I have been for a while. It's actually for me, because I use it as a thought partner. I've made my Google search default to ChatGPT. I'll show you what I mean. If you're seeing my screen, right, Rhonda? Yeah. So when I do a search, so what's a good question to search? Let's say, what's a good activity for dividing fractions? I'll be a bit clearer. Okay, so I'm not doing this as a Google search. My Google default bar, I've changed it to be a ChatGPT search, where it searches the internet and gives me responses. That I found that it gives me, so because so it will do a web search. So this is a new feature that ChatGPT has. We can turn this on, just that button there, you can turn it on or off. And when you turn it on, it also searches the internet. So this will search the internet. You can see I've got it's search, and it'll tell you the sources. So from ID Galaxy Teacher, from Number Dyslexia, and it's come up with a bunch of ideas, but it's summarized it for the kinds of things that I want. So I can then go through and look and say, yeah, I want to look more into this ID Galaxy Teacher, or I can do follow-up questions like, I like the sound of 6, which is a fraction fishing game. Tell me more. All right. The fraction fishing game, etc., how to play. And there you go. So, and again, just continue the conversations like, yeah, I want to do a variation where I want to include X or Y, or I have English language learners. Okay, let's try this one. I have EL students that might find this hard. Any suggestions? Let's go Amy suggestions. Oh, regenerate. And there you go. Support English language learners in mastery fractions can be enhanced through the following strategies. And again, it's searching the internet. So if I wanted to think for itself, I'll just turn this off and ask the same question. But there you go. And I can ask this in O1 and it'll do some chain of thought thinking, etc. as you go through. So hopefully, so those who, I don't have a poll for this, but those who said they rarely or never use ChatGPT or LLM tools, maybe in the chat, you can share if you've been inspired to maybe give it a go and can see some real use cases.
Hey, Mo, we have a in the chat, JFY Networks, who we work closely with. They've developed an AI tool that will review and give feedback based on a rubric for constructed responses on questions.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, really good. And I think that's something that we really, we need educators to, we need to give room for educators, space for them to experiment. And I think that's one of the problems, that people want to use these tools, but they don't have the time. But I can only recommend that you just experiment. And hopefully I've shared a way that it can be really light touch, very easy to start these, to use it as a thought partner, and you'll just get great ideas and then you can kind of run with it, and it will 100% save you time. Create a little bit of space, a little bit of room for that experimentation, and it will most certainly save you that time and give you that time back in your day. All right.
We also have a that said they're definitely wanting to give it a try. So that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome to see a couple of nevers changing around. So great, we got something out of this webinar, and yeah, I hope you'll find it useful. Okay, so can O1 solve like the trickiest AP calculus problems, for example? I gave this a go just this morning, actually. It's like, oh, let me see. So, and then again, here's my process. I didn't want to go and Google search for it. It's like, so I just asked it, what is the most difficult AP calculus question? You can see the sources here because I allowed it to search the internet. Search the internet, and it told me, oh yeah, the 2023 calculus question had this question 6, which was hard. So I was like, okay, write out the question for me then. And it wrote out the question for me. And I actually asked it, and then I wanted to copy this in, and it didn't copy it correctly. So I said, can you write it in LaTeX for me so I can copy it in, because so I can use it in O1, and it did. I tried it with ChatGPT 4.0 and it failed with the answer. The correct answer was -8 or 9 for that part D. And then I tried it with O1 preview, not review, and it nailed it. And this is how you know I tried this morning, and I haven't, with a typo in there. There you go, thought for 21 seconds, went through the process and nailed it. So just think about what this also means for math assessment. You could give a difficult question like this as a take-home assignment task. You kind of can't do that anymore. A lot of our assessments might have to be in the classroom, especially any kind of handwritten assessments, etc. So it's going to change how we might test our students off computers, on pen and paper. I think these are all things that, yeah, we really need to rethink, because there's getting to the point where there's no kind of question that ChatGPT or other large language models can't do. Okay, all right. We're starting to get into Milo now, which is, I know, something that everyone's keen to explore. So how does math-based approach AI in product development? As you know, AI came in, we immediately said this has great potential, but so important for us to co-design solutions with educators, that we don't want to do these things in a vacuum. We are a bunch of technologists, but we have a lot of math educators in our team. More than half our team are math educators. So we wanted to really go about and say, okay, what's the best way to approach this? Because it's a kind of core to our belief, and something that we've really, personally, I've really discovered over the years, that tech innovation on its own can't really transform education. Educator innovation on its own also can't. But the transformation really happens when you get the educators and the technologists kind of working together. And so I visited 100+ schools. I did it in Australia. I'm looking forward to doing a US tour sometime, visiting, talking to everyone about AI and applications in the classroom. And I asked, what are your top concerns for adopting AI in education? There was a lot of resistance initially. I think, and I'm seeing that kind of ease over time. And so the biggest concerns were cheating, hallucinations. Hallucinations is the AI term for it gets things wrong. It imagines answers, and it doesn't just imagine the answers. It's worse than that. It is so confident with an incorrect answer with those hallucinations. And so that was a problem. And as you've seen with O1 and kind of the developments, that's just getting better and better. Teacher visibility and control was such a really big one that came up. Safety, an obvious one, and equitable access. And so we listened to educators and went like, how do we go about kind of dealing with all these? And I won't take you through like the whole process for that, but I'll get to like our solutions. So we created the space for experimentation. At MathSpace, we immediately went, so it was released in February, and then I think in March, we were like, okay, everybody's getting ChatGPT and let's start building something. And we just created that space to experiment and learn. And as we did that, we had the birth of Milo, which is basically taking the best of MathSpace and this new technology with large language models and say, how can we combine that into something that's going to give students really specific feedback? And so what we try to do with Milo is really the way to think about Milo. And for a lot of you who've already used MathSpace, current users of MathSpace, one of the great things that makes MathSpace great is it gives feedback to students step by step as they're working through a problem. And when they get stuck, they can ask for a hint and they get that helpful help as they go through. But it's a one-way conversation. It really, you don't go both ways. It's a student, I'm stuck, give me a hint. Here's the hint. Okay, I still don't get it. You still don't get it. You still don't get it. There's a video and this thing, and like we really try and provide a lot of supports, but we don't give them the opportunity to kind of go back and forth. And that's really what's changed now with Milo, is by combining the power of large language models, we still want to give our great teacher written hints because they're really written in a way. We've had educators working on this for a long time, and so we write the hints in a really specific way. We give the right context. We know the context and all those things that the LLM doesn't really have, the large language model. But then we want to turn it into a two-way conversation, and so let them know how it can help, what is 413, etc. And so you go through and gives you an idea. And I'll do a kind of live demonstration of this for sure. I know you're all interested in. So how do we deal with all the problems, the cheating? Well, when students ask what's the answer, Milo really pushes back and encourages them to break down the problem, and will never give away the answer as it goes through. How do we deal with hallucinations? So this was a big one that we spent a lot of time working on. As we kind of talked about how large language models work, they work based on context, and the more context that you can give it. So we're quite lucky in that MathSpace in that we have all the context of the hints, the videos, the step-by-step for every single problem. And we provide that context to make Milo a lot smarter. So instead of Milo coming up with its own hint, Milo has the context of the hint that a teacher might say. And if they know what a teacher might say, then when a student asks a question that we don't have exactly in our hints, they know the kind of style that to reply with. They know the background knowledge that they have. They won't pitch the chat with the student at a level that's beyond they won't tell them to use calculus to solve a problem where they don't need to use calculus. All those kinds of things that go into it, and the accuracy on the math. So we're getting to the stage now where we're 99% accurate with the responses that Milo can give on the mathematics. We also have a whole process, and I'll talk a bit about that, where we only turn Milo on for questions that we've done testing on, and we're confident that Milo can give good responses. So we don't have Milo on for every question. Milo's only available once we've done that testing for that question. I think we're at now 60% of our content has Milo on. Then teacher visibility. So everything that a student writes to Milo is there for the teacher. And teachers have the option, if they have Milo, the option to first purchase Milo for the students, but they have the option to turn on or off for a task. Just like they can turn on hints or videos, they can also turn off the Milo support if they want to do more of an assessment of students' ability. For safety, before we send anything to OpenAI, we first check that it's a safe message. And then if there are messages that are dangerous, then we flag those and we share those with teachers. So our support team will reach out to you. If anyone has used Milo, you might see. We also do this for things that are just poor language, as students will do. we have a system where I think we give them 3 strikes, and then at the 3rd strike, we will send a message to their teacher. We'll turn off the chat until their teacher has a conversation with the student, and then the teacher can come back to us and say, yeah, I've had a conversation, student's not going to do that anymore, please turn Milo back on. So that's some of our approach to safety. And then our commitment to equity. So we offer free trials to everybody. We want them to try it out for free. There is a cost associated with this because every time a student sends a message to Milo, that's an API call to OpenAI. And so there's definitely that additional cost that comes through that. And we are so committed to this being the future that we're providing it at cost. So the cost at the moment is $5 per student per year, and that's just the cost of AI. We know there's like other programs that are charging like, I don't know, $30 per year is kind of what I'm hearing for the AI component. But we're just doing it at the cost. And that cost is coming down, and we'll continue to bring down the cost. We want this to be something, we think it's the future. We want this to be something that's just available to everyone inside the mass-based product, and will always be an optional add-on. So we won't force any kind of price increase on anybody. We'll always say, here, turn it on, try it for a month. If you think it's great, then consider adding it to your subscription. Okay. And we're really excited. Yeah.
There's a Q&A question that is a really great question. I'd love for you to answer.
Sure.
It says, what about students that are not native English speakers? Does it translate?
Yeah, we're getting into the demo. So yes, it does. And I will show you that in a second. Great question. Okay, be as scientific as possible and A/B test everything. So our approach to Milo and building is to not, we don't know what will work. We have ideas, we have hypotheses, and this is how we approach it at MathSpace. So here's an example of we use a tool called Growthbook, and you can see here, see, we have a control and a variation. I'll show you what this test was for. So this test was, you may recall that we had traditionally put our hint, video, and example buttons here on the bottom for students to use. So we wanted to test, what if, so that's our control, our original. What if instead we changed it to have them as conversation starters? Can I get a help video? Can I get a hint? Can I get an example? So it's the same buttons that we had, but we put them over here. And our idea, our hypothesis here was that students would, 1, use them more because they're kind of a little bit more in their face. And 2, that they'll give better help because students will know that they can follow up with Milo, with Chat with Milo, if they don't understand a hint. So we thought for a couple of reasons, this might be a better approach. And so we said, okay, we don't know for sure though, it's just a hypothesis. So let's test it out. We got our control with 50,000 students on that. And we put our variation with 17,000 students getting that new screen where it was a conversation starter. And then we checked, what are the percentage of students who use a help option? And we saw that help options were increased by 7%. And this is the distribution. So it's statistically significant because it's highly unlikely it's 0%. So the number of help options used per student also increased by 10%. The number of students that use skip step. So we know that when a student gets stuck, they skip a step. So this was an indicator for us of if they don't skip a step, then they're finding our hints helpful. So those on the variation skipped a step 3% less, or 3% of students skipped it less. And by how much? Number of skip steps per student, 6% decrease in the number of skip steps. So we looked at this and just like, oh, we've just passed on every metric here. So this was a great move. And so we changed it. And now you will see it sits on the side and students have follow-up conversations and they're just finding it more useful. They're skipping steps less. They're using the help options more. So that's our approach to everything. Everything is an A/B test. It's an experiment. It's a hypothesis. We don't know if it'll work. Let's test, see if it works, and then go and make decisions that way. And so that's been our approach throughout. All right. So with that, let's get into, well, the results on this is student engagement has increased with the help, has increased by 30%. So a lot more engagement with the help. And the accuracy after chatting with Milo increases by 20%. And of course, the all-important metric of would you miss it if it was taken away? We have 68% of students would miss Milo if it's taken away. Students are a very tough they're tough judges. So this is the highest of any of the features we've released. This is the highest amount of disappointment that students will get if we take a feature away, a math space. All right, so the moment we've been waiting for, let's get into a demonstration of the Milo's capabilities. And I'm going to start with the French question, with the Spanish question. So yeah, we can translate to Spanish. And this is a feature we've only released in the last few weeks, where we're leveraging the AI to translate to Spanish. So we have a question here: at a party, Justin makes a drink by combining water and cordial. Sounds like a fun party. What is the total amount of the drink as a mixed number? And if we click our translate to Spanish, you see Milo over here will translate that to them, for them. Now a student can just ask a follow-up question. I don't speak Spanish, so I won't ask it in Spanish, but I'd say, do I just add them? So chatting to Milo, it's like, yes, you need to add the two mixed fractions. First, can you separate the whole numbers from the fractions in each mixed number as you go through? Now, one of the things that frustrates students sometimes with MathSpace is they'll try and show they're working out over here, and they might enter 7 as a first step. And when they enter 7, they'll get marked incorrect, and they'll be like, "Ah, damn you, MathSpace! You're so picky with your answers." Like, well, we can't accept 7 because that's not the answer. So MathSpace is just using a computer to mark. But when you have over here more of a safe space where you can kind of show you're working as you go, let's try if I put just 7 over there. And you can see it's just so much better at the context. So great, you've added the whole numbers 4 and 3 to get 7. Now let's focus on the fractional parts, 1/8 and 1/3. What do you think is the next step to add these fractions? Notice how we try and finish every response with a question. We don't want this to be something that's just like telling you what to do, or like just, this is what you do next, very procedural. We want it to be a two-way conversation. And so we always come back with a question at the end. Okay, what do you think is the best next step to add these fractions? Just like a good teacher would. And that's what we're really trying to emulate here is, what would you say if you were sitting right next to the student and they had this problem? And that's actually one of the ways we train our students. So I do a lot of classroom observations, and I sit with students and I say, I just want to watch you use MathSpace. And then they get to a question and they get stuck and they're like, oh, what should I do next? And I say, don't ask me, ask Milo. And so they'll ask Milo, what should I do next? And it's the same thing that I would say. What is the lowest common multiple of 8 and 3 as I go through? And so it definitely takes a little bit of training to help students as they're going through on what are the right questions to ask. And just sitting with them and saying, okay, if you ask whatever you'd ask me, just ask Milo, and then you'll see the kind of level of the conversation that happens there. So it's really, really clever at these kinds of problems. Okay, we'll do a couple of other examples. Let's take a look at distributive law. Okay. All right, so what's the most common mistakes that students will do as they go through this? They'll put their minus 4m minus 3n, and they'll forget to distribute their negative across to there. Okay. Now, one of the nice things is you can say to Milo, can you tell me why that was wrong? And let's see what Milo comes back with. Okay, we need to expand expression. What happens to the sign of each term inside the brackets when you multiply? Oh, so I'm on the Australian, by the way. So we actually customize Milo for Australia and the US. So my account is Australian, which is why it says things like brackets. We say brackets, you say parentheses. We say expand, you say distribute. And it's actually, we customize Milo's responses based on the country that you're in. So just if you are unaware of the Australian math terminology, it should be, we need to distribute the expression, and inside the parentheses is what you get in the US. But there you go. What happens to the signs of each term inside the parentheses when you multiply them by a negative sign outside the parentheses? So it's kind of give you a real specific response as you go through, and can kind of pinpoint. So the nice thing about this is Milo has the context of the input that the student has put as they're going through. So it's not that we're starting fresh with Milo and it's separate to the maths-based experience. It's fully integrated in. So as they're putting their responses in here, they can have follow-up questions about their responses in there. So, which is really, really powerful. Okay, one of the things we've been doing is getting Milo to understand images. So let me give you an example over here. So we need to find the surface area of this triangular prism. And I kind of spoke about before how we train Milo with our hints. So let's say a student used a hint as they're working through this. And that's generally our first point of call, use the teacher-written hints. One of the great things about that is in our teacher-written hints, we have images to support the learning. So Milo and AI can't output images yet. I think it will get there eventually. Maybe in a year's time, we'll be looking at it and going like, well, we even get nice images to help students understand. But at this stage, it doesn't. So these are the maths-based hints. So it's important to know as well is that you don't lose out on the maths-based experience by using Milo. The full maths-based experience with the hints is all there, but I can have a follow-up questions. So what if I ask, so the green triangle is, let's say, 1/2 times 6 times. So I'm going to go 6 times. Instead of going the perpendicular height, I'm going to go with 5. And I want to see if Milo's smart enough to pick that up. Not quite. Remember, the area of a triangle is calculated using the formula 1/2 times base times height. What is the height of the triangular base in this prism? Okay, so really specific, like getting to the point of like you're using the 5 instead of the 4. So isn't it 5? It's actually the perpendicular line drawn from the base of the top, which is 4. So how would you calculate the area? It's just phenomenal. Like I'm still amazed by it now, and I'm always on edge because it's a large language model. The outputs are random. It's just choosing the next word. That's why I kind of went through that bit at the start. That's all it's doing as it goes through. But it has this amazing kind of ability to reason, and as long as you kind of provide that context. And so by providing that context, so this is really phenomenal. This is the kind of level now where it is really like having a human sit by your side. As long as we train our students to ask the right questions and learn to ask questions of Milo, you get this amazing ability to give this kind of step-by-step feedback. So yeah, that kind of brings us to the end. I'll stick around for 5 or 10 minutes to answer any questions. But yeah, if you haven't got Milo on, we are absolutely happy to offer a free trial. Reach out to Rhonda or whoever else at MathSpace looks after your school or district. And we're more than happy to give you a free trial, give it a go for a month, see how the students are using it. And I really think that it's amazing the kind of value that you can get where students are getting this kind of sitting by your side expertise from a tutor as they're working through. All right. Question time. Good to see some experimenters coming into the chat and people excited about Milo's capabilities.
There's one open question in the Q&A.
How would you compare this to Khan-Migo? So I've had a bit of a look at Khan-Migo, and the biggest difference is really the biggest difference of MathSpace and Khan-Migo has always been, which is that MathSpace has the context of the step-by-step results that a student is going through. And so, I've seen a couple of blog posts. I saw a Dan Mayer blog post, kind of really critiquing the Khan-Migo approach because it doesn't give you any insight into student thinking. It kind of just starts again. So students put in all this effort, put in this work, and with some wrong responses or something like that, or they've done their work on pen and paper or something like that, and then the AI tutor is just kind of going, let's start again, and it's just too much of a disconnect. So the real difference with MathSpace is because we encourage students to show their work step by step as they're working through, that the context is already there. And so the question is just right at their fingertips as they go through it. So that's really the biggest difference. And I think that's the challenge for I think EdTech products trying to incorporate AI into their product is, a student can just go to ChatGPT on their own and ask the question and get an answer. That's not what we want to do. We want the learning experience of, I know the context of where you're at. I know the context of everything you've tried in that problem, and I can give you very specific feedback as you're working through. And so, yeah, hopefully you've seen with the kind of demo that we have there, that's what we're aspiring to do. And that's the kind of thing that we can do with MathSpace. All right. If anyone does have any follow-up questions, I'd be more than happy to share my email around, and you can ask me directly. Of course, you can always reach out to your school consultant, looks after your school. What is the error percentage as of now for MathSpace? We got 99% is the accuracy of Milo on responses to student queries. And we have now, I'd say, about 60% coverage. So in terms of the number of questions that have Milo support. So not every question. And that's something that we want to make sure that we don't increase coverage and decrease the accuracy. So it's something that we actually monitor ourselves and say is, as Milo's capabilities get better, we'll increase our coverage to more and more problems. So images, for example, is something that we started recently, where it's like, well, if we can give Milo, if we can train them on the images that are included in there, does Milo give reasonable responses? And we have a team that goes through and checks these things and tests and tries to break it, and then says, this is Milo's giving good responses on this. Milo's not yet ready to do, maybe images with trig, for example. Images with calculus, not quite there. All right. Do we have
Another question?
Where does the teacher view the student's interaction? Good question. So whenever you review a student's scorecard, you'll open up their answer to a particular question, and you will see the full list of the hints and the help and the chat that they had. So it's accessible there. We are going to be putting in some work to give you more summary data of students' use of Milo. So you don't have to kind of go into the scorecard and actually review the responses. We want to kind of flag, okay, this person's been using Milo a lot, or this person hasn't been using Milo much, to give you kind of an idea of like where you might want to look into it. If anybody is abusing Milo, you will receive something from our chat support team that'll come up in your chat and you'll know that we've turned it off for that student until you've had a conversation with them, and you can just reply to the chat and say, okay, turn it back on now. I've had the conversation. Be nice to Milo. I didn't really show that too much. Maybe I'll do a really quick share. Anyone that is sticking around. But if you do deal with, can you just give me the answer? Okay, you'll get that pushback, and then you'll get a question to really try and bring that conversation back. Yeah, similar things like with like irrelevant stuff. I watched Superman on the weekend. Let's see. That sounds super fun. Now let's get back to the math problem. So like entertain them very briefly. And we found this is good that but we want to get them straight back into solving the question. If they do after 10 chats, so we have another AI that's checking the conversation. And after 10 messages, it checks the conversation and to check if it's on track. So if the conversation is not on track, then they'll get a message saying, okay, chat's turned off for this problem. It'll be available again on the next problem, but the conversation's getting off topic. And so we're turning off Milo for the rest of this problem. And that we found that that's really good for students. They can scratch their itch of like, hey, I want to just try out Milo with some see how far I can test it. But then they'll pretty quickly see, okay, well, I don't get very far, and then they get there on the next question. They'll know to keep it on topic. Yeah, and also if they do say something not so nice to Milo, they'll immediately get the messages being flagged as inappropriate. And this is what we use, where if this comes up 3 times, then we'll say, okay, they're abusing it. Let's let the teacher know. Yeah, I think it's 3 times in a week. I don't know what exactly they are. All right. All right, thanks everyone for coming, spending some of your afternoon with me. We enjoyed it. We had a question about Schoology or Moodle. Yes, MathSpace does integrate with Schoology. So yeah, reach out to your consultant to get that set up, not Moodle.
And as a reminder, you guys are going to get a copy of this recording. And so you can always just reply back to that email and set up some time so we can get Milo turned on for you, or chat more about our Milo AI. So chat with us.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.